I came on and at the time didn't know what issue I would necessarily be working around or be organizing about. And the issue I started with was public transportation. And at the time, I don't know that I had ever ridden a bus I know I'd never ridden a bus in Colorado Springs, and maybe once or twice in other cities that I'd lived in. And mainly not because I was against it, more just because I'd always had a car. It never came into my mind as something that people would need or people used outside of myself. It was outside of my bubble. And so when I came down, I kind of delved into this process of trying to understand what transit was about and who was using it. And I have to admit that, in the beginning, it was nerve-wracking. I was nervous to maybe be exposed to people that I didn't know or wasn't comfortable with or couldn't necessarily guess how they might act. I used to walk an extra block to avoid that block of the bus terminal because there were so many people waiting, and what if they said something to me, or what if they acted strangely? And it was sort of just a lack of exposure, I think, that drew that sort of response from me. Because once I made the choice that transit was going to become a part of my life so integrally, and once I made that choice, I sort of delved into that experience with a little bit more of an open mind. And I've actually enjoyed getting to meet people on the bus. I've never had any bad experiences personally. I think I've just been able to dive into the idea that it's okay for me to interact with the public. Like, we all live so often inside zones of comfort that we never really expand ourselves outside of. And so it does still take a little bit of time, I think, when you first start into this world of public transportation to say, like, yes, you're gonna come across and come into contact with new people, and some of them are going to be great. Some of them might be lifelong friends that you have more in common with than you could have ever guessed. And sometimes they might be really strange people that are talking to themselves or singing music, but never has anything dangerous or unsafe happened. It's more just been, yes, that's another person that's interacting with life in a different way than I am, and I'm going to move on with my day and be okay with that. So now, transit, I feel like I call it going car light. I own a car, and I have the choice of using my vehicle, which is honestly, it's a privilege that I never really understood. That there are people that, due to their income level, due to their physical abilities, just will not ever be able to drive. Whether that looks like epilepsy, or whether that because you have a physical disability of another sort, whatever that looks like. I'm privileged in that I have a lot of choices, and so I get to choose to use the bus when it makes sense, and I get to choose to drive my car when it makes sense, and I ride my bike as often as possible, and I walk, and I Uber, and my transportation modes are varied. And I guess that might sound overwhelming to someone from the outside that's so used to just saying, well, I have to go somewhere, let me hop in my car. But I can determine, based on my experience, I know when it makes sense to use a different mode. Like, I know if I'm going downtown, I ride my bike because I hate dealing with parking downtown. I hate circling the block and dealing with parking meters. I know that if I want to go to UCCS, I ride the bus with my bike on the front uphill to UCCS because I don't have to deal with parking, and then there's a perfect downhill bike trail all the way back down, and so I don't have to work very hard and I still get a little exercise. I Uber when it makes sense. If I ever get stuck because I rode my bike and the weather changes, I can take the bus, or I can do Lyft or Uber. I guess the point is my transportation modes are varied, and it depends on the day and the weather and my mood. But I know when it makes sense for me to use one mode or the other, instead of automatically assuming that a car is the best way to get around, because oftentimes it's not. And not just because you don't have the option of another mode, because it truly just doesn't make sense. I don't want to have to deal with parking downtown, so if I can ride my bike, it makes so much more sense for me to do that. Fortunately, I have the physical capacity to ride a bike, and so if that's not an option, again, your choices are limited. But I'm speaking from a place of someone that is privileged to have a lot of choices. But it's been more of a fun thing for me. I'm a lot more healthy because I ride my bike. That's the only exercise I do, because I hate going to the gym, but when my bike is integrated and walking is integrated into my day versus being another thing I have to carve out time for, I'm healthier, I'm happier, I'm not dealing with traffic, which is another beautiful thing because congestion just drives me crazy angry. And so I love living in a place where I can avoid that and have as many options as it makes sense for me to have in that day.